this slideshow.
This is going to be brief, just to give you some, this was actually part of a presentation I made in Washington just recently.
Can you use the microphone?
This is part of a presentation I made in Washington a week ago, and at a big conference, and it was wonderful that Dr. Cyril Wecht was there. Did anybody know him, who I'm talking about? Yes, he's quite famous. And what was really nice is that he asked me for a copy of the David Ferrie book. And so I signed one for him. And then he wanted one for his son and for his grandson. And then I got a big hug. So I'm feeling really good because some 15 years ago, people told him that I was a real fraud and a creep and all that. And things have changed a lot as more evidence has come out. When I first spoke out in 1999 and said that Lee Oswald had tried to save the president, I would have been laughed out of this room but now it's very different. We worked very hard to show who Lee Oswald really was. So now this is somebody else that is important to know about. His name is David Ferrie. David Ferrie was even stranger looking than that half the time, all right? And not his fault. He is a fascinating person. In Me&Lee, there's almost a week taken out. We had to remove about 100 pages because the book would have been so big nobody would have bought it. Nobody could have afforded to buy it, and the postage, a postman would be crushed under it. Okay, so anyway, we took it out, and it turned into a 500-page book about David. A lot of information that helps tie together the very last straws, I believe, in the Kennedy assassination case. David Ferrie was the first person that was interviewed in New Orleans by the FBI right after the assassination. And of course they said they're not going to open that can of worms. Okay, so here I'm going to show you a few pictures and say a few things here, and then I'm going to talk to you. And trying to get more information to you. Here we go. These are different pictures of David, looking fairly normal because he wore sunglasses and hat a lot. Okay, that helped. Now he had alopecia. He'd lost a lot of his hair. David was a very complex individual. I'd like to say that he was born on the same day, or same year, as my father. He never got married. He said, he called me, he said he wished he'd had a daughter, and if it would have been me, he said that's what he would have liked. My cousin's name is David W. Vary, and he's David W. Ferrie, and we used to joke about all the Mary, Ferrie, and Vary thing that went on. He wanted to be a priest. I wanted to be a nun. When he found out at that time, not anymore, I was an atheist, and he argued profusely with me to try to get me to change my mind and come back and become a Catholic again, just like him. Trouble is, I don't want to be just like him. He was called in for moral charges because he was homosexual and had been seducing teenage boys. It's very hard to go and defend a man who has these kind of problems. I'm hoping that you will forgive him. I believe God has forgiven him because I think that he did everything in his power to overcome these problems that he had. One of the things that he did is he saved my life. Another thing that he did is he did his best to try to save Kennedy. And this is the marvelous thing about it. Let me show you a couple more pictures here, give you an idea about him, then we'll get to the podium. You'll see here, that's Belchase. It isn't Chase, it's Chas, is I think the way it was pronounced. And up there's a training facility. David Atlee Phillips, who is associated with Cuba operations and with everything going on in Mexico. He became the head of everything on the western side of the world, okay, and for the CIA. David Atlee Phillips admitted that they were working out there just a few miles from New Orleans. Who was training people out there? David Ferrie. We read that, you'll see this in many things online. It says, well, David Ferrie had a Stinson, which is a red and white, a blue and white plane at the time. It's red and plane now. It still exists. It's a very strong little plane. His dad got it for him. And they said, well, this thing didn't work. They never mentioned the L2, this aircraft, L2 Bush plane that he owned. that he bought specifically right during the time of the Bay of Pigs, was training kids in it, and David told me himself that he could land on the back of a flea with this plane. He was an extraordinarily good pilot. He knew all kinds of languages. The CIA loved him because he could talk to anybody in any language, and he could fly anybody anywhere, and he was a patriot. Now, what they didn't know is that he actually didn't hate Kennedy, and this is very important because in JFK and other places you'll find out that David Ferrie is one of the primary suspects in the Kennedy assassination. I'm going to tell you that he came up to the podium like this and he said, Kennedy ought to be shot. He told that to 70 retired military officers at their very first meeting. They told him to leave the stage. But you know what? Somebody saw that, and I'm talking about some of those military officers, associated with the CIA, contacted David and said, hey, you want to help us get rid of Kennedy? Hey, maybe you would. And, you're a great pilot. We know we can trust you. You hate Kennedy. You hate Kennedy's guts. We hate him too. The plot started in New Orleans. Can you hear me? The plot started in New Orleans. And that's why Jim Garrison got involved with all that he did. And that's why they were on his case and did everything they could to destroy Garrison. But what's interesting is that Dave had changed, but now he was keeping his mouth shut. You see, Dave was also an Irish Catholic, just like Kennedy. He had voted for Kennedy. He told me so. And I found records of that later as myself. So I was saying, well, David, in front of people, you always say you hate Kennedy. And he said, what am I going to do? I'm going to say, hail to the chief, when his, Kennedy's enemies are around me, all these anti-Castro people that, they see Kennedy allowing the Bay of Pigs fiasco to happen. They think I still hate Kennedy, and I'm going to keep it like that because I'm learning things. He was able to penetrate some of the earliest plans about the assassination. When Lee went to Dallas, Lee was pretending too. He did a lot of pretending. We're talking about somebody who actually passed out pro-Cuban flyers and things at FPCC. He founded the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, but it never had a meeting. It had no members. What he'd do is, if somebody actually showed up, like at the Camp Street address, 544 Camp Street, or if they showed up at the 4907 apartment that he didn't even live in, he lived in 4905. And by the way, I've had the pleasure of talking to the owner of that property and their son. She's dead, and the Gardners are dead, but also to the Gardner family and to the Eames family. They both questioned me on what did the backyard look like, what would it look like inside, what was the biggest piece of furniture, and I was able to tell them. So they're really on my side. They know I've been in there. They know that I was in, New Lee and inside. And I told them, too, about what I thought about the government saying that Lee lived in 4907 Magazine Street when he lived in 4905. Well, he paid the rent there, and he paid the utility. When he left there at the end of September, the Warren Commission, just for your information, the Warren Commission had the documents showing that he lived in 4905, but they told everybody what a deadbeat Lee Oswald was because he did not pay the electric bill and the water bill for September when he left 4907 instead of 4905. He was paying that for, I always think of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Well, this is a Mr. and Mrs. Eric Rogers lived there. He moved them in because Marina was pregnant, and he did this in July, right when he lost his job, and he starts working right away in pro-Castro stuff. He worries about his family, so he moves into Rogers, into what had been his office there, 4907, and they take his mail. Now get this, Mr. Rogers tells the Warren Commission this. They say, you mean you took his mail for July and August and September? Oh, yes, sir, I did. Did you ever talk to Lee Oswald? No, I never talked to him. Now, this mail is coming in from the USSR. It's like the crocodile. It's like you've got FPCC mail coming in, to 4907. This is back if people thought that you were a communist, you lost your job, and he's collecting all this subversive mail. And yeah, it's right there. Anyway, in the book, Me&Lee, we talk about a lot of things like that, prove who Lee Oswald really was. And here's Lee. He's gone to Mexico City, and I could talk about that again in a minute, and I hope you'll direct me, because when I'm standing, I lose my mind, I've been hurt. Now, Ed is an author. I'm a witness. I've had to move to Europe. I was hospitalized 5 times after speaking out in 4 years. A number of my children won't speak to me. In fact, even today, I received emails saying, Mom, I wish you'd just quit this because, you know, this is not good for our family. You care more about this than you do about our family. I care about my country. I care about you. I wanted to cure cancer. They destroyed my opportunity to cure cancer. They used me for a cancer project to kill people. And yes, I'm upset about that. And I'll never forgive them for that. And I'm going on 72. I do not care what happens to me. I'm going to tell you right now, it is important that you get the message out. We have today a cancer treatment industry with cancer palaces, huge edifices, fountains, lights, lots of commercials on TV to tell you, come get your treatment with us. You tell them to go to hell and get ourselves a cancer cure. They can do it, and they have it. They make billions of dollars. I'm sorry, this is where my passion is. I can't help it. I want to cure cancer, and instead I watch people suffer with what I call the 3 medieval tortures. They cut it out, you know, they burn it out, or they poison it out, and it comes mostly right back and then kills them anyway. And you're suffering. How many? Yes. So you just tell them the next time you are better off taking your anyone with, unless it's a systemic blood cancer, they can do a pretty good job with that because they, after all, if you replace the blood often enough, you may get some of that out of the system, right? So leukemia is more often cured. Some breast cancers are being cured, but frankly, they're giving you a real song and dance because we're talking about, they say, oh, survival rates for 5 years, you know, if you're still alive, you could be dead the next day, but you're counted, if you're alive at the end of 5 years, as a survival statistic. They don't do that overseas. It used to be 5 years cancer-free. They don't tell you that anymore. That way they mask the statistics. It isn't 5 years cancer-free now, it's 5 years survival. Go look it up. So half of those people could have cancer and die within the next few months, but you know, there they are in the statistic as a survivor. That's not the same as cancer-free. You're being fooled, you're being hurt. I live half the time in Scandinavia. They protect me there. And I'm very, very grateful for what they do. And it's very hard to find me. That's the way I want it after all the things that have happened to me. I want to tell you something. I have a friend, his name is George. George did not want to get operated on when they learned that he had cancer. But after 6 months, he was finally persuaded either that or die, and he got his cancer treatment. Well, he was in the hospital for 6 weeks, and then after that, it took a year to recover. But he did get cured. Now, during the time that he was recovering, they had someone cover his job. They kept training people, and the kids and things, so they learned how. They had internships, you know. When he was well enough, he went back. His job was saved for him. Now get this, I asked George, how much did it cost you to get your cancer treatment and everything, and how much did it cost you to stay in the hospital? And he told me, Judy, it took $1.25 a day.
This is in Scandinavia?
This is in Sweden. $1.25 a day to rent the TV set. To rent the TV set. And he said, oh yeah, the food was awful. They wanted to get us out of there as quick as we could. You know, they could. So food wasn't that good. It was all fresh and clean and decent to eat, but it was the same, basically, you know, very, very common fare. No ice cream, you know. So, and no TV unless you pay for it. You have a question?
Yes, so they pay for medical care.
Everything. And free college education. Okay. 5 weeks mandatory vacation for all workers, equal pay for men and women. 82% of the people vote. They have like 10 political parties, 3 major parties. In other words, the people run their government, and then they tell you over here, oh, socialism is terrible. Okay, well, you ought to see how it is over there. And 2 days ago, it came out, Sweden has 99% recycling. 99%. It's the cleanest country in the world. And I came here, I hate to say it, but taking off, I took off from Austria, actually, but the air was so clean. I landed in Washington, and I thought, are there fires going on here? And as I've flown around, the air here is so dirty, and you don't even know it. You're used to it. Filthy air. You're looking down into this gray muck. and the water tastes bad. There's something bitter in your fruit. There are all kinds of things that I can notice because overseas they don't allow GMOs. They don't have fluoride in the water. I could go on and on. My friends, if this country cared about you, we would not have troops being sent to Ebola-infested countries to build infrastructure when we have our bridges and our buildings and things are crumbling. We have our roads crumbling. They can go ahead and pay native Africans there to build their own stuff and leave our kids alone and keep them out of there. I'm telling you, it is a dreadful thing. You have not seen what I have seen, perhaps. Ebola can put huge blisters, gigantic ones, all over your body. The suffering is intense. 50% to 90% of the people die, and they are sending thousands of our troops over there to be... How dare they? Yes.
Judy, could you explain how your initials got on Lee Oswald's time card?
Yes, I know. I got carried away on this.
We asked you to bring you back. You're
Okay, thank you. See, my passion was to cure cancer. Look what happened. Okay, please read the book. I say, now, people have said to me, how is it that, why did you save all these things like your time cards for 50 years and so on, which I have done? I saved everything because I knew I was in history. I knew that I was in a project to try to kill Fidel Castro, and I wanted proof of it. I didn't know that it... Now, David Ferrie, going back to Dave, he was able to successfully pull off that he hated Kennedy. But what he had found out, that Kennedy himself, okay, was not really responsible for what happened at the Bay of Pigs. It was his treasonous generals, okay, and the CIA, and he fired them. That's why they wanted to kill him. All right? Don't think for a moment that the media, okay, has any clue. They don't even know who they're talking about anymore. These are young people. They're, you know, they can't find Paris on a map. Okay, and you expect them to know about the Kennedy assassination? They'll see whatever they're told. It is a crime, but that's what's going on. All right. Now, he's talking about my initials on time cards. I have a lot of things, and there are a number of you here. It won't be possible, probably, for you to see everything, but I'm going to show you some of the actual files that I kept. I even kept streetcar little tags and things because when I started falling in love with him, I wanted some kind of souvenir. So, I mean, and if you saw my home and how I live and the places I live, I mean, my kitchen looks like a laboratory. I don't keep much. I keep it here. You asked me a date, I knew that that Lee told me, please tell my children I'm a good guy. Tell them what happened. Tell them what I did. And he also said, you know, one of the things I regret too, he says, besides missing all you, is I'm not going to be able to read books. He's not anything like the man that you've been told he was. He's intelligent. He had dyslexia, so his spelling was atrocious. We have a document that we found out that he even kept the original, where it says that, you know, a militant group is going to try to kill Kennedy on the 22nd. This was sent on the 17th of November, okay, on a Sunday. Lee Oswald sent it, pretended to, that it came from Hoover. That's easy to do. You just put that at the top, do all the SAC, see? Sent it to, and he was able to memorize lots of things. Sent it out, at least to Houston and Chicago and to, we believe, Dallas and New Orleans. Not as many, not all over the country. Just look that way. But there's this awful spelling of his, so we know it was him. I mean, it says assassination instead of assassination. That's Lee all over the place, okay? I used to sit there and say, look, he was writing FPCC letters, Fair Play for Cuba Committee letters.
Maybe Hoover couldn't spell very well.
Right, Hoover couldn't. Well, anyways, filled with atrocious, but he had to work fast. And he was putting it on a telex, and the telex going clickety-clack, clickety-clack, and it was making noise, and he's probably doing this in the middle of the night. I mean, he's risked his life. He told me he was under suspicion after that. That was a Sunday. And because I couldn't talk to him, he said he had to get off the line really quickly. I had to call him back on Wednesday to get what's called the call wheel going, and you'll find out, oh, I learned all this spycraft stuff, oh my goodness. But it all started because he thought I was far more involved than I really was. And it's a story in itself. And I'd like to tell you because it shows how Lee learned to trust me for the wrong reasons, just as and we fell in love. Okay, anyway, I think back of what he was like and everything, and the date of today is October 4th. October 4th is about the time that he left Mexico City and went back to Dallas, and we had our first phone call that we had been really, except for his going briefly into Mexico, crossing the border there. I hadn't heard from him. We had to stay apart so that Oxner would think that we were separated from each other. Oxner sent me back, treated me like I call it a 3-minute boiled egg. It destroyed my career because I objected to having these prisoners, maybe more than one, injected with something that would kill them, and here they were volunteers, and nobody's going to volunteer for that. So it was really awful, and I had written this note saying it's just unethical to give someone a disease that may kill them when they volunteer for it. It was a very short note, and I put it in an envelope, sealed the envelope, handed it to Oxner's nurse. I actually made a trip, and I'm not supposed to go to the clinic very much. And it wasn't the regular nurse. This is, after all, we're talking about August, okay, and this was late August, and she was on vacation. And this old biddy was there in the place of this nice, cute nurse that was there. Oxner surrounded himself cute nurses when he could. Anyway, this old biddy was there, and she said, "Well, is this urgent?" And I said, "Well, yes, ma'am." "Okay," so she opens up, starts reading it over the intercom to Oxner. Yeah. I got out of there as fast as I could, but it wasn't long before the phones were ringing all over the place trying to find me. And when he found me, the curse words he used and everything were, I just don't want to even talk about it. He said, "Oh, I'm going to give you a civil, final interview." Oxner was persuaded that he can't just kick me out, because newspaper reporters were following my career at that time, because I was like a prodigy. And I had done some things that hadn't been done as Ed explained. So they had a problem on sending me back, because if I didn't do any cancer research or anything again, they say, "Well, what happened in New Orleans," right? So they got me a job in a prestigious chemistry lab that was founded by 2 famous professors at the University of Florida. It was right next to the University of Florida. This was Peninsular Chem Research. Peninsular Chem Research, you had grad students lined up for half a mile to get in there. I'm in there, and they messed up my records so much. I've got these, I can show you copies of my checks. I don't have those with me, I have others. I don't take everything with me on the trip. And those checks will show you I was working overtime. I was making good money. All this thing. My official record shows that I have 1 course in chemistry with a D. They really messed up my records. And they tried to mess up the records on the time cards. Lee and I weren't just hired the same day at Riley's. I'm going to go further. We interviewed on the 9th, of May. We're hired the same day. On the 10th of May, we went to a small company, a sub-company. It only had they had only 3 people in the main office and had 8 people working for it. This was Standard Coffee. In all the years that all these hundreds of books have been written about Lee Oswald and about the Warren Commission, about the Kennedy assassination, nobody had ever noticed that Lee Oswald had worked for a whole week for this company, and there's only one sentence in all those 26 volumes where one hand says, Standard Coffee asked that we get this background report on Lee Oswald. That's it, in one sentence. Everybody missed it, but I was there with him. I was there with him for a whole week. They laundered our records, because they had to launder mine too. We had a fake background report. We had a lot of fun making Lee Oswald look really normal, okay? Because this is a young man with a great deal of guts, and his goal was to enter the Soviet Union before he was, while he was still a teenager. He made it by 2 days. That was his big dream. He's going to be a spy, just like Herbert Philbrick. There's so much I wish I could tell you, but most of it's in the book. And also join me on Facebook, because after people read the book, I say, look, I'll answer all your questions. That's why I put my face there. I've got a lot of security so I can do that. And I will answer your questions. And then I say, please write a 5-star report for me on Amazon, because we have the bad guys will do things like this. Here's this 1 star, and it says, "Who cares if Mary Sherman wore her hair in a bun?" That was his review for me, and I got a 1 star on Amazon. And people look at a 1 star, they don't read, and they'll say, I don't want to read that book. Anyway, so I've asked people to do that, and I'm asking you to do this for Edward T. Haslam. He's not screaming like I am that it's not right to have these awful reviews, and often they're made by the same person will buy a book and then under another name will buy the book again, so you can make 2 1-star reviews and it's the same person. You can tell from what they say and write. You can look them up. So there's a group that's still out there trying to stop the truth from coming out. And I see it on 2 levels, not just what the government has done, although that's bad enough. We have an illegal government that came into power, but also we have, as they say, a cancer treatment industry, and there are a lot of things they don't want you to know. A lot of the reason of the cover-up is so that you will not get into this other information. They don't want that. You're talking about many, many lawsuits against many, many pharmaceutical companies. Just think about that. Okay, so anyway, we're using this Standard Coffee, and I learned that I'm going to be a secretary there, and I'm going to cover for Lee when he's gone. And often I have to be gone, and the vice president himself has to cover for me. But that's okay, because Riley Company has been working with the CIA for years, and we have that from Jerry Hemming. Now, Jerry Hemming, how many people know who Jerry Hemming? See, just a couple people, but he's important too, just like David Ferrie. Jerry Hemming was with what's called Interpen, and he was doing anti-Castro stuff. It was a CIA asset. And Lee told me, if you ever need Jerry, go ahead and you tell him these things. So here are some of the things. I flew to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and talked to Jerry Hemming early in this century. And I said, look, Jerry, I'm going to prove that I knew Lee and that who I really am. I said, look, you spoke Apache. And he said, wow, nobody knows that. Okay. I said, you, and this is really important, your family, something's very important about El Monte, California. He said, nobody knows that. It never got out. That's where his family was for safety. And yet, I knew that. I said, a man named Carl Faber Smith worked with you and taught your troops, I think he was under the name of Carl Smith, to blow up bridges and stuff. And, then he said, wow. And then finally, anyway, I told him that he had a bivouac out at Marathon Key in Florida, when everybody knew about No Name Key. Nobody knew about Marathon, Florida, okay? Nobody. So then he calls Nigel Turner and says, look, you've got to get that woman on film. And that's how I got on the History Channel, because of Jerry Hemming.
Can I turn the lights on for you? I just want to make sure those are your final pictures.
No, they're not.
Okay, you're right.
All right, I'll go back to them, okay?
No, that's all right.
I've had head injury, so I have a short-term memory, but if you ask me any question about the past, that's all intact, thank God. And I do thank God for being alive, really. All right, so anyway, my initials, like Ed was saying, were on that time card because Lee wasn't there. I mean, Lee would clock in at 8:47 one day, 9:52 the other, 8:30. Only once, the first day he was hired, was he clocking in on time. He clocked in at 8 o'clock once in 11 weeks. Now if I were 5 minutes late, they docked me 20 cents. Not him, all right? But I digress a little. We moved from Standard Coffee after 1 week together. I have the records. I've got the check to prove it. Now, he moved just before I did, just before I did. My check was cut by Standard because I was just over the 12 o'clock or 9:30 or whatever it was whenever they went through. His is right after, so his first check actually is from Riley, which is good because it covered up the Standard. Mine was delayed a little, so mine says Standard. But I'm the only person in the world who noticed that we worked, that he worked 1 week at this small company. Of course, I can prove that I did too from my check that I saved. Checks, and I'll show it to you. All right. Now, we move over to Riley, and I have become the Vice President's Secretary. Wow, I can hardly type. I'm sorry to say that, I'm very, very good at spelling, but I'm not, I don't care. I didn't care how I was spelling it, okay? If it's on, it just, typing was something that I had to learn very quickly as I could, and I got better. I went from 19 words a minute to about 25 words a minute. This is for executive secretary for the, it was pretty pitiful. He was so glad when I was finally able to leave. So I'm going to last, my God, I'm finally going to get a decent secretary. And he had too many times to cover for me, yes.
May I make a footnote comment about
Of
Mr. Moynihan?
course, yes.
Mr. Moynihan was a former FBI agent who founded Inca with
Yeah, co-founder, yeah.
co-founder of Inca with Dr. Ochsner and Eustace Riley. And after the Warren Commission, when the Riley said, we don't want this guy around here anymore, his next job was over at the Metropolitan Crime Commission as executive director, where Dr. Alton Ochsner and Eustace Riley sat on the board.
Yes, and of course when Garrison made his, started going into investigation, it was he, for the Crime Commission, who said, stop what you're doing, you know, we don't want you talking about this, and he had to go before the grand jury and explain himself, okay? The last thing he wanted was to get his name embroiled in this thing. But he was there, and yeah. And these feds all look the same, so help me, every FBI agent I saw there that summer, they all seemed to be wearing suits and shiny shoes and had their hair skinned back, even Bannister, you know, much as he drank it with his red nose, still you could smell them out. My goodness, no wonder they needed FBI informants. None of them could have got anybody to talk to them. They all, you know, soldiers of the truth, you know. Oh my gosh. So anyway, and he was that way. I mean, yeah, yes, Mr. Moynihan, I'll do whatever you want. Because they exude this holier than thou, and we are powerful men, and you had better, mind your business. And they will bend the law, definitely. And some of the things they would do, for example, Horace Pena, P-E-N-A, was a friend of Lee's, and he tried to say that Warren DeVries of the FBI there in New Orleans, that Lee and Warren were friends. Next thing you know, Arresty Pena is being sued by Carlos Renier, and then he gets beat up in his own bar that he owns. So then Pena is quiet, and that's mainly what happened. And if you think how you're going to get people in New Orleans to be quiet, Hugh Ward, if you read the book Me&Lee, you're going to find out how important Hugh Ward was. David Ferrie trained Hugh Ward how to fly. In fact, he trained half the people in Guy Bannister's office how to fly, and half the people over at Garrison's office. I mean, Dave Ferrie is everywhere teaching people how to fly, because these good people were often in the Civil Air Patrol. And I find it fascinating that we have Hugh Ward dies in May of 1964, okay, when the Warren Commission begins its testimonies and things like that. His plane explodes, and with him goes the former mayor of New Orleans, who knew about our project too, okay, and his son with him. That was May. In June, Guy Bannister is found dead. The official record, according to Nikki Chetta, did it, so I signed it, you know. Chetta said, yep, this man, he died of natural causes, heart attack or cerebral hemorrhage, but his wife and his mistress said he had a bullet in his back. So did my witness, Anna Lewis, say the same thing. And there was a crime scene tape all around his office. He had been in his office for weeks and weeks after the assassination. He closed down his business. That man knew he was in trouble. He didn't live very long. All right, so that you have May, June, and then comes July. And Mary Sherman, it makes the front page the day the Warren Commission comes. If you think anybody's going to talk after that, I'll tell you who talked. You can see him on the film JFK. You've got this guy, this fat little jolly big, this Catholic lawyer with his 6 and 7 and 8 kids. Anybody know his name?
Andrews.
Dean Andrews. Okay, it's played by John Candy in the movie. And it looks just like him. I handed Dean Andrews extra FPCC posters. I had actually cut them. We have found, by the way, Bob Groden likes me, I think, because, or maybe, I don't know if this is the reason, but I know he likes me anyway. But he has in his book, Search for Lee Harvey Oswald, you'll see a flyer that's trimmed. That is the space at the top and the space at the bottom of the flyer are the same. I did that because I couldn't stand the space at the top anymore. That is a scientific part of me that really has impeded me most of my life. Okay, I have to have everything perfect. And this got me kind of in trouble. But anyway, yes, I actually handed these posters to Dean Andrews when Lee was handing this is August 9th. I was seen with Lee, and when I got back, I found out I was fired. So the day that Lee Oswald is arrested on August 9th. I was fired. Bingo. So I've got the check to prove it. I have all of this stuff. We had a statistician go through it, and chances were 99% that Lee and I were lovers, intimate, according to his statistics. And the chances were better than 1,000,000 to 1 that our jobs were arranged. Of course they were. And there's a lot more I could say, and also about people that we knew who died that aren't even on the record. But anyway, Lee is out, and he's out, and he's out. And you say, well, why didn't they fire this man? Well, I'm the vice president's secretary. Guess what happens when Lee Oswald's, you can't find 40 hours for him very well, and things are messed up on half of his time cards. One of them shows him clocking out at 7:32 p.m., for heaven's sakes. I mean, that's not 4:30 or 5:30. Or how about another one I had to prove? Because I had gone, and I would slip in the line there at exactly 5:30. That's my precise line. Bingo. That was Monday, 5:30. Tuesday, 5:30. Wednesday, 5:30. Thursday, 5:30. Friday, 5:30. And then somebody said, look, you can't do that. Nobody does that in a row like that. So I did a 5:31 sometimes, okay? Why am I saying that? Because he's clocking in at all different hours, but he's clocking out precisely. Nobody ever noticed this. Well, that I was covering for him, and I had to stay and clock him out like that. So you're going to see all of this, and I'm going to show you a couple more pictures now, okay? I can't see. I thought there was a step there. I have a vision problem because I've been hit on the head a couple times. Okay, let's see here. Different pictures of David. And these are not his best pictures. Honestly, looked a little better than this, but most of these are mug shots. He has bruises on him. He taught hand-to-hand combat. He taught kids to fly. He taught kids survival. He taught them to shoot. And when you, in the film JFK, when you see that this man gets hit on the head, pistol whipped by Guy Bannister, okay? That man's name was Jack, well, S for Suggs, all right, Martin. And Dave called him Jackass Martin, okay? And Martin's best friend was David Lewis. David Lewis and Jack Martin were both bisexual. I mean, they're both married, but they actually lived together themselves later, okay? And, I'd have to say that Jack Martin's sidekick, all right, it was David Lewis. His wife was Anna Lewis, and she's the one that served us free pie at Thompson's restaurant. You can read about how I got kicked out of a house that turned out to be a house of ill repute. I didn't know it. Lee had put me there, and he didn't know it because of Jack Ruby, and you can read the whole thing in the book. I mean, as you know, Ed Haslam, by the way, added a couple little details in the book because we talked together, and he added a sentence that I would have written had I had the wits about me to do it, but it's true that these women were being brought down by the police wearing only feathers and handcuffs, okay? And most of the time, if somebody put something in there and tried to amend, like Lee asked me to marry him 100 times. He said, I know very well that Baker never asked you to marry him. He just said, I'm going to marry you. No wedding ring. He married me in one day by running me over to Mobile, Alabama, where there was no waiting. I was
She's
really
talking about her
worried.
husband now.
Yeah.
This is my husband, not Rod. His name was Robert. And I thought I was in love with him. What I was in love with was sex. I didn't know that at the time. It was sex. And, you know, I have to say that was a whole different thing from laboratory experiments. It opened up a whole new world for me. The trouble is that the man that I thought I was in love with, he was autistic, and I didn't realize that. We know that now. He knew how to act, and he had all the equipment, okay? He knew how to use the equipment, but bless his heart wasn't in it. So he marries me, and the next day he leaves. He's going to be gone for weeks. Oh, he says, I couldn't have told you. You wouldn't have married me if I told you I was going to be gone all the time. I got a postcard from my husband. I'm living in New Orleans, and the postcard is from New Orleans. He writes, hi, I'm just passing through. I thought I'd say hi. This is my new husband. He's with his friends. And it hurt my feelings. Can you imagine how I felt? For people to say, how could you have had an affair with anybody when you were newly married? I say, where was he? And then he's in town, he drops me a postcard, doesn't even see me. Spends $50 at a time, which is the equivalent of almost $500 a day, a time. I'm desperately trying to make money, and he's spending it out there on gambling or whatever he's doing. I want to divorce him. Also, you'll read in the book, Me&Lee, how because of his love machine, I had a problem. So I dumped ice cubes on him once. He didn't like that very much, but it really cooled him down. Okay? So, I mean, you would do it too if you had been under the same circumstances. Lee was so different, and he felt very badly that he had steered me into the wrong place. He got me into a nice little house instead. Her name of the landlady was Susie Hanover, and I've got her photograph with me. I'm going to make it this a little shorter, so if you can come by and see everything I've got. So if you just pass through, and then I'm hoping also that you'll go to Talking Stick and some other places and see the love affair. You can see it on YouTube. They break it up a lot. There's so much. I wish we had more time to tell you everything. But one of the things I want to get across is that David Ferrie pretended to be anti-Kennedy, and he was able to get information to Lee. And Lee gave his life to try to save Kennedy. They had to shoot this man. J. Edgar Hoover, the great J, okay? I'm the little J. I hope I'm stinging like a wasp in this. This great J. Edgar Hoover, John himself, it is 4 hours after the death of Kennedy. It's November 22nd. They have captured Lee Oswald and said that he did all these bad things. The SAC right there, the FBI right there in Dallas, writes a memo. Now, guess what? The evidence is on its way to Washington. The rifle, it's a Carcano. It's not a Mannlicher Carcano. They get it all wrong. They get so much wrong in the Warren Commission. Mannlicher Carcano is the name of the ammunition. I want to be specific. It was a Carcano rifle. Okay, Italian rifle. Only we have two of them. We have one in evidence now that doesn't even match what they have in the so-called backyard photos. Then we have a Mauser for 24 hours before they decide to turn it into a Carcano. So they get things a little mixed up, you know, in their zeal to accuse Lee Oswald of this heinous crime. Heinous crime. Now here's what I think is telling. We have this. They're saying, look, we've got this thing that says wanted for treason. Somebody printed this. Somebody hates Kennedy. We've got this black-edged funereal ad in the newspaper. Okay, I mean, these are people who hate Kennedy. We've got a group out there that burned a cross in a yard, and they put their head to go to, you know, Kennedy go to hell and things like that. So they're saying, shouldn't we look into this? It is 4.5 hours after Lee was arrested when he says, not necessary, true subject located. We don't have to, before he got the evidence, Hoover was telling his people in Dallas, forget it, we've solved the case. The Warren Commission did not do an investigation. They took the information that they got from the FBI and they called some of those witnesses, and some of the line of reasoning and questions that they asked were absolutely absurd. Does anybody here have any idea who got the most questions? Do you think it would be Marina Oswald about her husband? Who do you think would be questioned the most by the Warren Commission? Well, it was Ruth Payne. That's where Marina lived part of the time. She got to some 2,000 questions or something. You have people like myself and Guy Bannister were never called. Neither Cray Shaw. They ignored New Orleans, practically ignored it. David Ferrie. They interview him. They've got all these records on him. He vanishes. Nobody brings him up. Nobody talks to him. Okay, nobody. The Warren Commission stuff is a fiasco. It's a hoax. And I beg of you, when you see, you're going to have seen all these media things saying, you know, well, Oswald, there's no doubt about, and oh, you have been told that only 61% of the people believe that Oswald did not act alone, right? What a loaded question. Use the brain that God has given us. If you're asked the question, have you stopped beating your wife? No matter what you say, it looks bad. They asked the people, did Lee Harvey Oswald act alone? Yes or no? This gave no opportunity for the people to say he didn't act at all. Now that's how they got the 61%. I mean, people have got to say, ooh, I've got to choose between did he act alone or not at all. I mean, it wasn't no, not at all. Did he act alone? Now, there were some other polls they don't tell you about. We find out that 80% of the people believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. If you ask that question, and I'm going to ask in here, raise your hand if you think Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. Just raise your hand. Okay, that's about 80% or maybe 90% of the people, all right? I want to tell you right now, Lee Harvey Oswald was a hero. Guess what we're going to do in New Orleans? Any guesses? Anybody see my Facebook? Yes.
Birthday party.
We're going to have a birthday party for Lee Harvey Oswald's 75th birthday on the 18th of October in New Orleans. We are going to put candles up in the sky. Everybody's already paid for it. Dr. Pepper's, we have a birthday cake so big that it can serve 200 people. We're going to tell the people in New Orleans they will be there. You ought to see what they did when he went to the Jefferson Parish Library. Come on, Ed, tell them what they did at the Jefferson Parish Library when you tried to talk there.
Well, we had 500 people show up.
Wow.
The room held how many?
For a room that was designed for 200, and we squeezed 300 in, and 200 couldn't get in.
The people of New Orleans know the truth. We're going to have a birthday bash, and I hope they do it every year because he's their native son. And when he had to get arrested on August 9th, what he told me how hard it was for him? He said, I grew up in this town. He said, I stayed clean. I had to live with, bad parts of town. I never got arrested. I joined the Marines when I was just 17. I wanted to serve my country. Now they're forcing me to hand these out. I'm getting arrested. And he got, by the way, you never hear about, he got beat. He was beaten in the police station. They pinched his chin so bad that you can still see the marks in November from what happened in early August on his chin. They pinched his ears. I've noticed efforts talking about this, that some of these pictures have been doctored and they've taken the marks off. That's what they do. And they've done that with me. A lot of things about me have been removed. I'm out of time, right?
No, I just want to make a comment.
Sure.
I forgot to mention that I have a website, okay, which is drmarysmonkey.com, but spell out the word doctor, D-O-C-T-O-R. And the reason I'm mentioning this is the witness to her and Lee is Anna Lewis. We've got her half-hour interview on there in video.
And she was intimidated. They threatened her and everything.
We've got the entire History Channel episode called The Love Affair, which has been withdrawn from the History Channel, but you can see the whole thing there. And in the blog, you can listen to a conversation between LBJ and J. Edgar Hoover 1 week after the assassination, where they are setting up the Warren Commission to accept J. Edgar Hoover's report that he's already prepared.
Starting from November 22nd, they said it was Lee and didn't look any further.
Well, LBJ said, yeah, Edgar, I only want one report, and I want it from you, and I'll put together the commission to accept it. That is the Warren Commission in a nutshell.
Yeah. It's obsolete. It's a lie. We have had wonderful people like you that refute it. And how many of you believe everything the government says? Raise your hand if you believe it.
I do.
Okay, we got one.
I think there's I was a witness to this whole conspiracy.
Yes, sir.
That I saw the date right after I was abducted. Right after they said Kennedy was dead, and put on this a shadow bus, and I saw Bush and Hoover get on the bus, and they were sitting next to each other.
Now, Hoover hated to fly, so saying bus is okay with me here somewhere.
Well, it was after a quick stop at an airport too, so I don't know.
Yeah,
you know,
well, I mean,
exactly
he had to fly
how-
sometimes.
But anyway, the FBI, I was in a debate with this guy, McAdams.
Oh, you don't want to debate with McAdams, he's a,
Well, I know, but he only
what do you
answered,
mean?
he couldn't really answer my question.
oh, he won't answer, no.
But another fellow there
I mean, he says.
gave me this incredible information, and I gave it to him. They
Yeah.
had no comment on it. Was that this FBI Frazier, when they examined the rifle right after the
Yeah.
assassination, he said, "No, we didn't do a swab test." Well, why? He says the barrel was full of rust.
That's right, it was rusty, that's
And
exactly
he
right.
said the first shot would have blown out all the rust, so we don't do it. So in other words, the gun wasn't fired; it was planned.
Yeah, it was probably another Carcano that was used, and we have dud bullets all over the place. We have some wonderful books out there like JFK and the Unspeakable, that show you about the treason of our own generals, our own people against Kennedy. Anyway, David Ferrie loved Kennedy in the end. I came from Florida and I didn't like Kennedy. I had written a nice letter saying I want to do whatever I can for my country to Kennedy. Then I went to the University of Florida and met all these anti-Castro people, that kids that were there, and they all hated Kennedy. I came to New Orleans thinking Kennedy was a real jerk. And Lee said, I want to tell you, Kennedy saved our lives. We'd all be dead if it hadn't been for him. How dare they? Do you know what they put in Dallas for the 50th anniversary? They still called it Dealey Plaza. How dare they, for one thing? I mean, they have LBJ Causeway, and they've got all this, and in Washington, they have Dulles Airport. All this stuff. For Kennedy, they had a black slab, so help me, it looked like something out of The Witch, the Lion, and the Wardrobe. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. A black slab, so help me, looks like a coffin. That's what Kennedy got for his 50th anniversary. There should have been a 50-foot high statue. Come, please, to the JFK Assassination Conference. It's free. Now, when Lancer and COPA were running their conferences, they want $125, they want $350 to get in. Ours is free. You know why? Because all of the people, oh, please donate, help us do this.
When and where?
It is November 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. It's a weekend in Dallas and Arlington. You can go to my Facebook, and I have friends there. Also, sometimes terrible trolls get on there and say, you